Very excited about our next session, where I've got Kate Bassett, who is the editor of Management Today and publisher of Britain's Most Admired Company Studies and a number of other seminal studies that are really firsts in this country and very important, I think, for Britain's role in terms of its leadership and its efforts, and celebrating that within the articles and in the exposés that Management Today develops. So delighted to have Kate here, and in particular to have one of Britain's most admired companies, McDonald's, Paul Pomroy, who is the UK CEO, both to share perspectives, what it is to be a most admired company, what is the recipe of that success, and how you drive the change and the relevance in the market. So Kate and Paul, please, welcome.
Thank you, Sandra, for that introduction, and welcome, Paul. So I just want to start with a snapshot of McDonald's in the UK and Ireland. 1,380 restaurants, 120,000 employees, serving 4 million customers every day. I mean, that is a colossal business, and it's one that's growing, I think, more than 50 consecutive quarters of growth. So just to kick off, tell us a little bit about your journey through the Golden Arches, because you actually joined back in 1996 as a real estate analyst. So tell us how you made it to CEO.
So I qualified as an accountant back in the summer of '96 in practice for a company called Smith & Williamson. I worked in insolvency. The recession was just ending. For anyone that's worked in insolvency, it was a great time to be in practice. But obviously for the economy, it was much better that the recession did end. I was looking to get out, and McDonald's were actually advertising. This was back in the day when you used to get print, and we had a really exciting read called Accountancy Age, which we used to read on a weekly basis. In the back of that, McDonald's was advertising for new accountants, and the advert was a half-page advert, and it was the bottom of Ronald's legs and the stripy socks and the big red shoes, and it said, like all other blue chips, we expect our accountants to wear pinstripes, and it made me laugh. I went along not expecting to kind of probably go forward. Met Steve Easterbrook, who's now the global chief exec. He was in finance at the time, and sort of from that day on, it was all about the people and the connection. That started my journey, and then 22 years later, the Daily Mail writing that I'm Lord of the Fries, which was
Lord of the Fries.
Lord of the Fries. My friends have always had a good time at taking the mickey out of me. It's kept me grounded. But I've moved around the business a lot, which we can explore, but I've always taken opportunities, and the people, the franchisees and our suppliers have kind of kept me there.
And so going from accountant to CEO, what was that moment you went from manager to leader, would you say, in your career?
So there's a couple of moments in my career I look back where you take a gamble, and I've got to get the sequence right about what the success was. But I was in finance at the time, and I could have got promoted to a more senior position in finance. At that time, Steve was setting up a new team, which was the business strategy department, and he asked me to go along, move sideways and work in that department alongside marketing. It was great for my career. I also met my wife, which obviously that way around, she probably prefers it the other way around. But I met my wife, who was working in marketing at the time in McDonald's. But getting out of the black and white and the backward-looking finance team and working alongside supply chain and marketing and food really helped with my career. And that was the time that you kind of started to understand truly about investment and what matters to customers. And then secondly, when I joined Steve's leadership team in 2008, everyone kind of tries to help you understand what it's like to be part of a true leadership team. But I learned a lot along the way. I was very fortunate that Steve promoted me. I've been part of the leadership team now for well over 12 years. So it's kind of been a good journey.
Interesting that sideways move ultimately projected your career forward. So as Sandra mentioned, every year Management Today partners up with Echo Research, and we ask Britain's largest public and private companies to evaluate their peers. And last year, McDonald's was ranked as the second most admired company in the UK, which is extraordinary, really.
Yes.
Tell us about that turnaround piece. And how you've built McDonald's corporate reputation.
I suppose the bit, if you look back to the early 2000s, between 2000 and 2005, we lost our way. We focused a lot on opening new restaurants. At the time, we was opening 100 restaurants a year, which wasn't a problem in itself, but what happened was we spent too much capital on those new restaurants, and we didn't invest in the real estate that we had. So we had 1,000 restaurants that became quickly tired and dated. I mean, you remember the plastic seating that we had, and the GRP, as we called it, which wasn't very comfortable. So we lost our way. We also, as the critics started to talk about us, we didn't feel confident enough to go out and tell our side of the story. And that went on for probably 4 or 5 years. And then Steve took over at the start of 2006. We had a huge explosion, Buncefield fire, up at one of our DCs at Hemel. And it was kind of, to be honest, Christmas of 2005, it couldn't have got much worse for the brand. So there was only one way to go. We needed to walk the talk before we started going externally and talking about what we did. But there were things we already did that people didn't know. So we already used, British and Irish beef, British potatoes. We was already free-range eggs, and one of the first major retailers to move to free-range eggs, organic milk. There was loads of stuff that we did we just didn't talk about, and we weren't confident enough to go out. So part of it was acting our way into a better position. We needed to reinvest in the look and feel of our restaurants. We needed to talk about the food. That's why customers come to us. They love our food, but they didn't feel comfortable about understanding what was in the food. So that journey helped. And then the last bit was we had a business model that was at odds with the rest of the global business model. Our business model globally was built on franchising. And for a long time in the UK, we did really well without franchising. At that point, we had about 20% of our restaurants were franchised. At that moment, we decided to franchise more aggressively, and we went from 20% to 60% in 3 years. And our franchisees keep us honest. They're on our high streets, in our communities, but also because they're entrepreneurs, they want to drive the business forward. So they won't. They're probably, it's like having your shareholders literally with a daily kind of access to your phone line for those chief execs in the room that have shareholders. But they will keep me and my team honest about what's going well and what's not going well.
And I guess it's like this team of mini entrepreneurs, because a lot of innovation comes from those franchisees as well. In fact, wasn't the Big Mac, didn't that come from a franchisee?
Franchisee in the US, yes, yeah. 50 years ago. So, I mean, some of the food that we sell has stood the test of time. So the Big Mac was 50 years old. So it's just turned 50. It's not really changed. We've reformulated it. We've reduced salts and sugars, like we have in a lot of our food. But the actual build of the Big Mac has stayed the same for 50 years. I wanted to ask you about that, actually, and I think it was a question from the audience earlier about respecting heritage versus sort of innovation. How do you combine the two? So there's a couple of things. One is the reason that customers come to us hasn't changed. The way they access us has changed over time. So whether that's using digital or delivery or drive-through, the way they access us continues to change, and we need to stay agile. But the reason they come to us is for our food. So respecting the elements of the past that make us strong. So our focus on execution is well known. Ray Kroc, the founder, had his famous tennis court where he was working out how to get the business faster and more efficient. That obsession with operations hasn't changed. Our obsession with detail, only having a number of steps on our supply chain, so we only have 5 steps maximum from farm to front counter, hasn't changed. But if you look at our menu, 10 years ago, we had half the menu we got today. So the kitchen space that we've got has to be able to serve 4 million people a day with a menu that's 3 times the size of what it was 10 years ago. And that's not going to change anytime soon with new salads and wraps and all the other stuff.
You wouldn't have found salads on the menu, would you?
No,
Back in the day,
or carrot sticks or fruit bags. So
yeah.
We're one of the biggest sellers of fruit to kids in the UK.
You said we have 4 million customers every day. What we do makes a difference. Do you think business truly can be a force for good? And again, what's your view of CSR versus making a profit? So I've got a 7-year-old boy and a 4.5-year-old who started school last week. And the 7-year-old, William, is he probably keeps me honest, more honest than any journalist. But he comes home weekly from school asking, what do you do, Daddy? What does McDonald's care about the environment? When we're out for a walk on a Sunday, he gets really irritated like I do when there's McDonald's litter on the floor in the woods. I think businesses,
if you go back 5 years, CSR was something you did to tick a box. If you're being, if most people are being honest, I think now it's not even. It's kind of beyond the green fees. Businesses need to take the CSR agenda seriously. Customers expect it of us. The new generation that are growing up, they look for where you're doing the right thing, but they also they do know you're on a journey. So again, we're 80% of our packaging is recyclable. 20% is still to go. I don't think my predecessors would have sat in an event like this and said 80% is recyclable, but 20% isn't. But
They'd have waited for 100%.
They'd have waited for 100%. So I think customers do understand that you're on a journey, and that journey keeps changing. But I think as a dad, we all need to look after the planet, and I think it's important that businesses step up and look after the planet. We don't always get it right. There's moments when we get it wrong, technology changes, you say something in the press, and then suddenly you find out there is technology that exists.
Or you bring in recyclable straws and there's a backlash.
Yes, the straws debate was an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, so the straws, just to be clear, are recyclable. They are biodegradable. Our plastic straws were recyclable as well. The challenge was that, in society, we are not yet in this country set up to recycle. Now, whether that's business, government, local councils, the way in which we're looking after society isn't quite there yet. But I think businesses have a role to play to set up. We have a facility in Aylesbury, partnered with a company called Aleco, who recycle all of our backhauled waste into energy. That energy supplies straight into Arla, who supply all of our organic milk, and the rest of the energy goes back to the grid. We want to set up more things like that. The challenge for businesses, getting the space and the planning, but then doing it faster. I think businesses need to come together. We've met with a number of the coffee retailers. We partner on, James Cropper recycle all of our cups. So Starbucks, myself, Costa, we don't compete on cups. So I think in the past we would have been guarded about meeting, but none of us compete on cups. So getting a facility through James Cropper, who then turn our cups into bags, I think it's things like that we can do to look after the environment going forward.
In all your years of retail, you said this is the toughest trading period we've had. Tell us a little bit about the current climate and some of your big challenges at the moment.
So I think it's the uncertainty, and I think the whole debate around whether it's Brexit or anything else, that it creates uncertainty for businesses. But I think there's been so much change in the last 18 months that's been thrown at business. It's not a whinge, it's just fact that there's so much going on, whether it's changes to minimum wages, changes to legislation, the scenarios around what may happen on advertising standards, or what goes into food. All of those things, as a British company, we're like most, we're not brilliant at loads of change in one go. Trying to get your head around that is tough. But then obviously all of that feeds into the psyche of customers, and their confidence is more fragile than I've ever known it. It doesn't take much at the moment for customers to stop coming out. And if they stop going out into retail, they stop coming into McDonald's. So we are directly linked to high street footfall or to people being out in their cars. So if fuel price goes up, people drive less. So I think the whole, I'm sure everyone in the audience feels it, but the whole society is waiting for what's going to happen with Brexit, what happens afterwards. If you're a food retailer, we don't know what the tariffs are going to be. We don't know what it's going to do to food costs. So you're trying to second guess and plan the best you can. But I think it's been a tough year. I mean, it's really been tough. And rightly so, customers now, because they have less disposable income, they don't give you any free passes. So trying new innovation is quite tough in an environment where if you get it wrong, customers quickly vote with their feet.
Mm-hmm. How do you find talented people?
So as a business, hopefully, as we attract talented people, firstly, because we are a business that, like I was interested 22 years ago, people are interested in the brand. They want to find out more about the brand. So firstly, I'm in a fortunate position that the brand attracts a lot of discussion, good and bad. Everyone's got an opinion on McDonald's. So that's the first thing, is it's quite lucky that you're working for a brand that attracts people. I think the key thing is people want to join a business or a company or an organisation that they feel valued in, respected, and then they also want to understand that they're going to get developed and be given opportunities. And I think I'm really proud of the fact that my mum, when I was younger, taught me that if you treat everyone the way in which want to be treated yourself, you won't go far wrong in life. And hopefully we don't get it right every time, but across the whole system, we try to treat people with respect, give them the same opportunities. There's not many businesses where, I don't actually even know the educational background of my exec team. I wouldn't even be able to tell you where they went to school, where they went to university, even if they went to university, for most of them. So we really base our whole kind of philosophy on, what can you do for McDonald's? Have you got the attitude to continue to grow, and then nurture people, train and develop them. The other thing that's changed, I think, is that the younger generation don't stay 22 years, which, getting your head around the fact that someone may stay 3 to 5 years in a business is fine. Trying to get your reward package to match that. McDonald's is a long-term kind of career. The way it's structured around shares and bonus incentives are more geared to long-term. So we're looking a lot at how do you not only attract people and train them, but how do you make it that if they only stay 3 to 5 years, they feel that they're getting the reward from a financial point of view that they want as well.
Yeah. What would you say makes a world-class business?
So in a retail environment, and everyone says it sounds cliche, but you've got to truly listen to your customers. If you don't, as we found out in the early 2000s, if you don't listen to your customers, you quickly come off the rails. So listen to your customers and truly make them part of. We start every planning cycle sitting behind screens, listening to customers, the good and the bad, and they obviously customers are very honest about what goes wrong or not in McDonald's. So listening to customers is a real key for us. Secondly, people, and having fantastic people in your business is critical. I kind of end towards then the business model and the strategy, because I think without the first two, the next bits are easy, because there's a lot of consultancies that help you with the business model and the strategy. But having a strategic plan and a vision that everyone can rally behind. So in McDonald's, we've got 200 franchisees, 125,000 people. Every one of those people are important to our business, and having them stand behind a vision and the strategy that they all believe in is critical. And the business model helps because the franchisees do keep us honest. And I suppose the final bit is, I was brought up on good old-fashioned kind of integrity and trust, and I think it's critical that you want to be part of a culture that you feel aligned to, and having integrity and trust across the business is important, because if that breaks, whether it's in the exec team or the franchisees, the moment as chief exec, if I turn a blind eye to someone's bad behaviour and don't deal with it, then that whole kind of pebble in the pond cascades, and then people quickly look at you as if to say, well, if you're going to tolerate that, what else will you tolerate? So that trust and integrity is critical.
Okay, I'm sure we've got lots of questions from Paul. Just for Paul, before I turn to the audience, though, we're just going to play a quick fire round where I'm going to get your view on something in just one sentence. So, Brexit.
Oh, certainty, please.
Certainty, please.
Yeah.
What keeps you awake at night?
Actually, being a dad. So for everyone, honestly, running a business is really easy. For those parents in the room, being a dad is really hard. And you don't know if you got it right until a long time in the future. So hopefully I'm doing the right thing for my boys. But that's what keeps me awake.
Long-term strategy.
Long-term strategy, yeah.
Best piece of career advice you've been given?
Take every opportunity that's in front of you.
Businesses can be a force for good by?
Doing the right thing.
Questions from the audience? Okay. We've just got a mic coming to you.
Thank you. Esri Karlebach, writer and consultant. You mentioned that you're not aware, perhaps, of the educational background of some of your colleagues. That's very interesting. Could you say something about the skills and training priorities within McDonald's at the moment? And also, how would you describe your relationship with the education system from schools through to universities? So, taking the priorities for us as a business, if you look at, we are brilliant as an analog business. We're not yet a great digital business, and it's something that frustrates me that we're not yet a great digital business. We've put the hardware in, but I don't think we're accessing the digital connection in the way that we could do to really maximise both our engagement with our people, but also our customers. The other part that we need to get our head around, and
is how do we truly become agile? When you're serving 4 million people a day, and you have 200 franchisees and 1,400 restaurants, in a retail environment where execution is critical, how do you have some fun around the agility? And that's something we're really grappling with at the moment, is how do you truly bring that agility and way of working into the business without mucking up all of the great stuff that we've done that's been so successful. So it's interesting when people talk about how many quarters of growth we've done, it sometimes can be a bit of a kind of an anchor to hold you back, because obviously people are a bit afraid to move forward. Our relationship with the education in the UK, I think, is really strong. We are proud of our links to education. We have apprenticeship schemes. We do a huge amount around degree programs in McDonald's, and I'm proud of the way in which we operate that. I don't want people to believe that skills aren't important. Of course they're important, but it's not the only thing that's important when people join McDonald's. In terms of the school that you went to, but what's really important to me is someone having an open mind that they want to keep turning up to work every day to improve. And when I get frustrated is when people, have the ability, but don't then turn up to keep doing better each day. And it comes from the days of sport when, for those that have played sport, if you turn up against a team and you lose when you could have won, it's really frustrating. So I quite enjoy winning, but winning fairly.
Over here.
Hello, John Williams, Association of Chairs. How do you manage the critics and all the noise on social media? And given we're here to talk about populism today, how do you keep that at bay and not get overwhelmed by it?
So I was asked what keeps me awake at night. It's not social media, because I'm not on it deliberately. So I don't participate in Twitter, Facebook, any of that stuff. I think it distracts the CEO. I do have a great team that monitor everything for me and keep me abreast of what is relevant. In terms of critics, what I ask of people is come and talk to us, understand the facts first, and then pass judgment. And I suppose some of the things we've done over the last 4 or 5 years, which I'm proud of, is the whole McJob discussion around is it a dead end job in McDonald's? That narrative has changed in the media. It's only changed because we've opened up the business for people to come and have a look at the facts. But I don't want to brainwash people. I mean, there'll be people in the room that'll be sitting there thinking, I'm never going to get McDonald's, and that's fine. I'm not asking everyone to be brainwashed into McDonald's, but base it on facts first. Some of the stuff that gets written on social, I'd actually be in prison if any of it was true. But it's amazing how it grows. So you've got to be ahead of the game in terms of making sure that you're continually talking about what you do. And I do understand the power of social, but I don't waste my time. Yes, I know some people can get a bit obsessed by looking at what news is trending on your business. We have a continuous, always-on strategy to talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and trying to open up as a business more. Interestingly, most of the critics don't really want to hear from me because they know it's, in their words, corporate speak. They want to hear from customers. They want to hear from people like Mumsnet, who are trusted to understand what goes on at McDonald's. The Farmers Union. They want to hear from people that are more independent than they do from me. So me posting a tweet doesn't actually always help.
Yeah.
Hi, Rod Cartwright. Your point about facts is kind of interesting because obviously these days, particularly in politics, one man's fact or one woman's fact is another person's fiction. How do you work around the fact that facts aren't what they were?
So, in a business world, the facts that I share either with the press or with stakeholders are the facts at the time. I've never knowingly spun anything because I think it's dangerous because a brand like McDonald's, if you spin anything, people can find out really quickly the true facts, and people have access to a lot of information. So firstly, I always make sure that the facts are the facts. I'm an accountant by trade, so I'm quite sharp on numbers. So when people are telling me stuff, it has to pass a sniff test. So for people in the room that get briefing documents, you've got to check it yourself as well, make sure it passes that sniff test, and then be confident that you've really got people around you that aren't spinning you. The worst part about getting this job is you suddenly realise that people really manage you, both suppliers, stakeholders, and company people. So having people around you that you can trust to tell you the truth, whether they're good facts or bad facts. Because otherwise, when you do an event like this, people will know the facts. And so on the politics side, we could be here all night on politics in terms of the facts around politics. Hopefully, I've been in the job now nearly 5 years. I'm not planning on going anywhere soon. So any facts that I share in the media, I'm going to be around to answer hopefully next year.
I think we've got time for one more question. There was one at the back.
Thank you, Jonathan Bunn from MetLife. And also in a former life, I was news editor of Accountancy Age, so glad we could play some part. You mentioned earlier on about finding your voice and helping become one of Britain's most admired companies. Was there any tension with sort of the US parent before that was preventing that? And how did you find that voice?
Oh, there's still tension. There's still tension today. I mean, it doesn't... So we work in a matrix organisation, and, I've only got, my boss reports straight into Steve, so it's a quick, and Steve obviously and I go back a long way, so there's always tension. So the tension that exists, and I'm sure with many other organisations in the room, that there's the global strategy on stuff and the global pace of doing things, and then there's the local tension about what you want to achieve. And there's times when you get held back from doing what you want to do quickly, but then there's times that you get support. So Straws is a great example where the corporation supported me to be the first market in the world to manufacture paper straws in the local market, and backed me to set that supply chain up with 2 local suppliers. There's other stuff that I get held back on, waiting for some of the other markets to catch up. And in the same way, there'll be other markets that I'm holding back. And I suppose that the beauty of McDonald's is we have a framework and flexibility within that framework, and working with your franchisees locally, you're trying to do the right thing locally and stay relevant, whilst understanding that the parent and the brand, there's a bigger power to be and making sure that it works in harmony. So I suppose it's negotiation, give and take, but that tension exists every day. I mean, Caroline's at the front, and she looks after me in terms of keeping me honest from a public relations point of view and corporate affairs. But there are times when I'll take a flyer and have to kind of beg for forgiveness, I suppose, if you feel passionately about what you want to share and what you want to do. But you're trying to make sure that you're managing it for the good of the system as well. But that tension still exists.
I know we have to wrap up now. Thank you so much for joining us today. A huge round of applause for Paul.